All right, so in this section, we're going to quickly talk about the Fresnel node. Essentially, this guy's going to give you a facing ratio between a facing color, which is facing the camera, and a perpendicular color, which is facing away from the camera. So we're going to start by unticking the Use Index of Refraction box, and that's going to activate this curve fall-off. And this is going to give us a non-physically accurate, but very easily art-directable fall-off option here, which is basically controlling the fall-off between the edge and our camera-facing direction. This can be really useful for if you want to make something, let's say maybe your spec roughness have an additional roughness on the glancing angle, or conversely, fairly rough facing the camera and very sharp on the edges. It can also help us with if we wanted to make this look like a satin material, where it's naturally brighter on the edges. This node can be super useful for things like that. So let's just take a look really quick at our facing color and perpendicular color. Pretty self-explanatory. Facing color is just going to be the color facing camera, and perpendicular color is going to be the color facing away from the camera. So we can do some pretty silly looking things with this. Moving on, let's go to Use Index of Refraction. I'm going to untick Correct Facing Color Intensity for a second. IOR is going to give us what are called the K and N values for various surface descriptions. If I'm being honest, this probably isn't the best way to go about doing it, considering the Redshift material has its own IOR option, and if you wanted to get into the advanced IOR options, you can enter the K and N values in here for red, green, and blue to represent various things like, namely metals. If we go to, there's a super killer website called refractiveindex.info, which I'm sure you may have come across before. It just allows us to say, hey, let's take a look at gold. And then that, combined with knowing the wavelengths of the different colors in the light spectrum, you can say, okay, well, let's see what our K and N values are for red. And you got to pick a number here. So, let's just pick the lower end, 635 nanometers. And in this website, you've got to enter it in micrometers. So 0.635 would be our red value. And then so you could enter these values into the corresponding value here. We'd have to have these set to black and white, and then wire it up into Color Maker. So we've got our red, green, and blue values. And if I pipe this out to the surface, it's going to look kind of weird. But if we were to plug this into the reflectivity of the metalness option on the reflection lobe, we would get precisely the same as the advanced IOR preset. So in this case, we'll take gold, and we'll just take a quick snapshot of what that guy looks like. And we're going to now flip the Fresnel type to metalness, and we're going to plug it into this reflectivity color. So let's see, reflection, reflectivity. There we go. So we'll take a snapshot of that, and if I A this guy, B this guy, you'll see they look exactly the same. Anyway, probably more hassle than what it's worth, but I feel like it's good to understand what these things do. So let's lastly take a look back at just the Fresnel node. Move this guy out of the way for now. And if you do choose to make some weirdo colors here, let's maybe pick like a red and blue. So 0, 0, 255, and 255, 0, 0. The last thing I want to cover is the correct facing color intensity. This is only going to work when we have Use Index of Refraction enabled, but it's basically going to correct down the values, since if we make a copy of this and look at it in just black and white, you'll see it's pretty bright on the edges and pretty dim facing the camera. So correct facing color intensity essentially tries to replicate that appearance. Since we're using super bright weirdo colors, just to take a look at what it looks like without, and then to take a look at what it looks like with. Not exactly sure, you know, when you might use this in this way, but if you're trying to make something weird, you know, maybe start here.